Good evening, I'm James Ezimoha and you're watching AnewZ. Let's see your headlines. Russia launches another large-scale attack against Ukraine. Situation remains tense in Syria as fighting persists. Thousands of Afghan nationals brought to the UK under secret program after data leak. Russia has launched one of its largest overnight attacks on Ukraine in weeks, with hundreds of drones and a ballistic missile fired across several regions. Ukraine's Air Force says Russia launched 400 drones and a ballistic missile overnight, targeting cities like Kharkiv, Kryvyi Rih and Vinnytsia. Most drones were intercepted, but 12 targets were hit. In the Kharkiv region, 2 people were killed in Kupiansk. In Kryvyi Rih, a missile strike and 28 drones caused major damage, including several people and knocking out power and water in parts of the city. American military aid has already been shipped to Ukraine. That's according to US President Donald Trump. It's after its meeting with NATO Chief Mark Rutte this week, where he laid out plans to supply Kyiv with weapons funded by the European Union.
US President Donald Trump says a new batch of weapons have already been shipped to Ukraine. The move follows the meeting he had with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte on Monday. Trump announced plans to supply Kyiv with military aid, including Patriot missiles, funded by the alliance members.
Do you think the first Patriot missiles, some of these weapons that our allies will buy?
They're already being shipped.
From what countries?
They're coming in from Germany and then replaced by Germany, and in all cases, the United States gets paid back in full. So what's happening, as you know, is the European Union, if you look, mostly European Union stuff, but let's put it in the form of NATO. It's very similar, but NATO is going to pay us back for everything.
Trump also announced a 50-day grace period for Moscow, after which the United States will impose secondary tariffs at 100% on Russia and its trade partners if a peace deal on Ukraine is not reached. Russia has dismissed Trump's tax hikes as the result of pressure from the European Union and NATO, saying it will manage the economic consequences.
We, after all, an unprecedented number of sanctions against us have already been announced, and we are coping. I have no doubt that we will cope. This conclusion is also based on an assessment on the analysis of independent, including many Western economists and politicians.
Trump has not communicated with Russian President Vladimir Putin since announcing the new threat of sanctions. His tougher stance towards Russia reflects growing frustration with President Putin as the war in Ukraine continues without a resolution.
US President Donald Trump is calling for legal action against Senator Schiff, accusing him of mortgage fraud. 6 years ago, Schiff led the House impeachment inquiry that accused Trump of seeking political favors. Here's what we know about it so far.
US President Donald Trump has called for Democratic Senator Adam Schiff to be brought to justice over alleged mortgage fraud. The accusation centers on Schiff declaring a Maryland home as his primary residence to secure a better mortgage rate. Trump claims this constitutes a sustained pattern of possible mortgage fraud. President cited National Mortgage Association, Fannie Mae's reported findings, adding that the Housing Finance Agency has referred the case to the Justice Department for potential prosecution. However, DOJ, Fannie Mae, and agency have declined to comment publicly. Schiff, who denies any wrongdoing, says both of his mortgage lenders were aware he used homes in Maryland and California year-round. A spokesperson dismissed the allegations as politically motivated. The senator, long targeted by Trump, led the 2019 impeachment inquiry that accused the president of withholding military aid to Ukraine in exchange for political favors. Though Trump was impeached by the House, the Senate acquitted him. Schiff responded on social media, calling Trump's latest accusation a political retaliation against his perceived enemies.
With less than 3 weeks until Donald Trump's new tariffs take effect, trade partners are reacting swiftly. Some are calling the move unfair, while others are racing to cut deals before the 1st of August deadline.
Germany's powerful car makers are sounding the alarm over US President Donald Trump's planned 30% tariff on European imports, which are set to begin on the 1st of August. The Mittelstand, the core of Germany's economy, warns that the measure could seriously harm manufacturing and export sectors.
If the US tariffs were to actually be implemented to the extent that has been threatened, this would of course have a massive impact on our American business. It would completely change our position on the American market, and we would have to see how we could react to this situation.
The European Union has called the tariffs unacceptable and fears they could bring transatlantic trade to a halt. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni urged a fast-track agreement with Washington, saying the EU must work with the US and the European Commission to secure a deal that benefits both sides.
We must avoid at all costs a trade war between the two sides of the Atlantic. We will continue, together with the other leaders and in constant contact with the Commission, to work towards an agreement that can be mutually beneficial and must be concluded before next August 1st.
Meanwhile, Trump has revealed major progress in Asia. He says a trade deal with Vietnam is nearly finalized, lowering US tariffs from 46% to 20%. However, goods illegally rerouted through Vietnam will still face a 40% tax.
We have a Vietnam deal, and I would say that that deal is being pretty well set. It's pretty well set. Again, that's an opening of their country. They've opened it up. Just so you know, these were closed countries. They were wonderful people, wonderful leaders, very strong, smart leaders, but their countries were closed to us, but our country wasn't closed to them. And so I said, you got to open up your country. So we're going to see.
Trump also announced that Indonesia will pay 19% tariffs, while the United States pays none, gaining full access to Indonesian markets. In Brazil, Vice President Geraldo Alckmin says the country will push to reverse the new 50% tax hike on Brazilian goods. He criticized the move as unfair and hinted at a need to extend the negotiation timeline.
And what we heard here is negotiation. In other words, a commitment to reviewing matters that align with the proposal of the Brazilian government and President Lula. It was also pointed out that the time frame is tight, that it's a short deadline, and that we should perhaps work to extend it.
Other countries Trump has threatened with high tariffs include Canada, Mexico, Japan, and South Korea. The American president had paused his harshest tariff plans earlier this year, but this month he brought them back, sending warning letters to many countries with a deadline of the 1st of August.
Tensions flared and protests erupted in Greenland following renewed US interest in the island. Recent comments by President Donald Trump have sparked nationalist backlash while a new government forms under pressure. At the core is a fight for independence, identity, and the control of the island's future.
On the streets of Nuuk, Greenlanders wave their red and white flags and chant, "Greenland belongs to the Greenlanders." Protests have swept the island in recent weeks, sparked by controversial remarks from Donald Trump, suggesting that the US would take over Greenland one way or another. Demonstrators have condemned the rhetoric as a return to colonial attitudes, echoing Greenland's long history of foreign control. The backlash intensified with the arrival of US Vice President J.D. Vance and Second Lady Usha Vance. Their visit to the US military's Pituffik space base, rather than any Greenlandic community, fueled accusations of disrespect and imperial intent. Many Greenlanders still recall the environmental damage left behind by past American military activity, from nuclear weapons stockpiles to the 1968 B-52 crash near Thule Air Base. Today, those memories are resurfacing with force. The protests were about more than Trump. They reflect deeper frustrations with lingering Danish control. Despite gaining home rule in 1979 and self-government in 2009, Denmark still oversees Greenland's foreign affairs and military presence. Now, more voices are calling for full independence and for an end to centuries of foreign exploitation, from Danish missionaries to American soldiers, With only 57,000 Greenlanders on the planet, the stakes are high. But through protest, politics and cultural revival, Greenland is sending a message that its future cannot be bought, occupied or controlled. It must be chosen by the people who call it home.
As global interest in the Arctic intensifies, Norway is facing growing pressure. The remote Svalbard archipelago, once viewed as a peaceful outpost, is turning into a geopolitical flashpoint, with US and Russia becoming increasingly assertive. The standoff could test NATO's credibility and shake the fragile balance in the high north.
What started as a controversial US interest in buying Greenland has sparked ripple effects far beyond Denmark. While President Donald Trump's revived rhetoric over controlling Greenland made headlines, it also emboldened a far more dangerous move: Russia's push into Norwegian territory, the Svalbard archipelago. Located halfway between mainland Norway and the North Pole, Svalbard is small but strategic. Its position could allow NATO to monitor Russian naval movements into the Atlantic. That's why Moscow sees it as a threat and an opportunity. Under the 1920 Svalbard Treaty, Norway holds sovereignty, but military presence is strictly forbidden, and all signatories, including Russia, have equal commercial rights. For decades, this remote region remained quiet. But now, as Arctic ice melts and great power rivalry intensifies, Svalbard is on the radar again. Russia is accusing Norway of creeping militarization claims Oslo firmly denies. But behind those accusations is a familiar tactic: Moscow creating a pretext to advance its own influence. From Victory Day parades and Soviet flag plantings to proposed Pomor Islands rebranding, the signs are growing. Russia is now preparing to build a new research station in Svalbard, and it's inviting BRICS countries, including China, to join. Analysts say it's a calculated attempt to internationalise Russia's Arctic ambitions while pressuring Norway to back down. Norway faces a dilemma. As a NATO founding member, it enjoys alliance protection. But unlike Denmark with Greenland, it cannot fully control Svalbard's future due to treaty limitations. And unlike Sweden's fortified Gotland, Svalbard is still demilitarised. Some speculate on a backroom deal: Greenland for the US, Svalbard for Russia. Whether real or imagined, such narratives could embolden the Kremlin. With Russian Arctic forces weakened in Ukraine, a military move is unlikely, but political pressure is escalating. Oslo has long walked a fine line, cooperating with Moscow on Arctic rescue, fisheries and environmental issues. But after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that balance is harder to maintain. Norway has faced criticism for still allowing Russian vessels, including from the Shadow Fleet, to dock in its ports. Now, with Russian provocations on the rise and the possibility of deeper US-Russia tensions ahead of the 2026 US elections, Norway is bracing for a colder, more contested Arctic. The fate of Svalbard could become a test not only of its sovereignty, but of NATO's resolve.
The Swedish Army is considering raising the age limit for recalling retired officers from 47 to 70 to address an expected wave of retirements. The goal is to tackle looming personnel shortages, especially in logistics, management systems, and technical roles. Training programs are already at full capacity, and officials describe this as a historic phase of growth for the military. The plan would apply to those who previously served at least 1 year as career or reserve officers. Fighting in southern Syria has drawn regional attention, with Israel launching strikes and voicing concern over the safety of the Druze community. The United States has called for calm and urged dialogue with Damascus.
In the southern Syrian city of Sweda, dozens have been killed in recent clashes between government troops and local Druze fighters. After carrying out strikes in Syrian territory, Israeli officials stated that objectives remain narrowly defined. Sources say the United States has asked Israel to pause its military action and consider diplomatic engagement with Damascus. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Washington is keeping a close watch.
We're very concerned about it. And Hopefully we'll have some updates later today for you. But we're very concerned about it. We want it to stop.
Rubio's remarks follow 3 consecutive days of Israeli airstrikes in Syria, including one that reportedly targeted the entrance to the Syrian Defense Ministry in Damascus. Israel insists it's not the targeting of government directly, but acting to neutralize any threats near its border and protect Druze populations in the region.
We are also operating in Syria. We have an obligation to maintain the southwestern region of Syria as a demilitarized zone bordering Israel. We will not allow a return to a situation where a second Lebanon is being established there, and we are also obligated to protect the Druze residents. We are doing this through intense operations. I hope we will not have to operate anymore. It depends very much on what is understood and done, and also what is not done in Damascus.
On Wednesday, groups of Israeli Druze breached the border fence in the Golan Heights and began walking towards Syria. As the situation continues to evolve, Israel's military says it's ready to act again if needed.
And now we're joined live from Jerusalem by Maurice Hirsch of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, good evening.
Now, let's be very clear. What Israel is doing is a violation of the territorial integrity of another state. Even the United States has reportedly asked Israel to stop its operations. What's your take on this?
Well, what we have to understand is that Syria is going through a phase of transition from the genocidal Assad regime into what appears to be a new regime headed by a former ISIS terrorist. And now what we're seeing is that he's moving, or seems to be moving, away from that side of diplomacy and more towards a direction of massacring the Druze population in southern Syria. This is obviously very problematic. It's something which Israel has a large Druze community, and their relations, their friends, their family are just on the other side of the border, and they are in risk of being massacred. And so Israel is coming to their rescue. This is something that we owe our Druze citizens, a debt of loyalty to them, to their families, to prevent their slaughter for no other reason other than them being Druze.
Now, is it not the case that Israel is using the protection of the Druze community as a pretext to entrench its positions in southern Syria? Like, are you worried that Turkey, for example, which is a strong supporter of the current government in Damascus, could somehow react, leading to increased tensions?
I think the understanding, or at least the proposition that everything that Israel is doing is for Israel's own benefit and not for the Druze, is something which really has no factual basis. The operations being carried out now are there simply to defend the Druze population that have been attacked. And I can understand that Mr. Erdogan would have a problem with that. He's also from the same cloth of these dictators who are willing to do anything. And so possibly there could be a problem with him, but I believe that even that can be surmounted when given the right opportunities.
Thank you very much for your time and insight.
Thank you very much.
A major data breach led the United Kingdom to secretly relocate around 7,000 Afghans who had supported British forces. The government says the operation is ending as it no longer sees a significant threat. Oli Barrett has more from London.
Well, this is a major breach for the UK government in terms of data, potentially one of the most significant data breaches in history. Thousands of people are having to be relocated to the UK because of it and because of some of the concerns for their safety after their details were put out by this breach and then onto parts of the internet. Now, the current UK government is apologising on behalf of the UK, but it also says that it now feels it can bring this secret relocation scheme to a close because it doesn't feel there is a significant danger posed anymore to some of the people named in this list. It will cost, though, hundreds of millions of pounds in total. And there are also questions about the super injunction that was put in place. Some people have called that a form of censorship. This was initially under the previous Conservative government, and the Defence Secretary at the time, Ben Wallace, says he makes no apology for having that injunction in place to safeguard as many of the people named on that list who had previously helped UK forces in Afghanistan as possible. But a major breach, as I say, affecting thousands and thousands of people in Afghanistan, around 7,000 people in total. Extra will have come to the UK under this secret relocation scheme after this breach. Ollie Barrett at Downing Street for AnewZ.
Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev welcomed Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, chairman of the People's Council of Turkmenistan, during an official visit to Baku. Berdimuhamedov said his trip aimed to reinforce partnership, build on past achievements, and explore new areas of cooperation. President Ilham Aliyev described the visit as a step towards strengthening ties, highlighting strong cooperation in energy, transport, and humanitarian sectors. Trade between Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan continues to strengthen in 2025, reaching $118.4 million in the first 5 months, according to Azerbaijan's State Customs Committee. Azerbaijan exported goods worth almost $20 million to Turkmenistan and imported nearly $100 million worth of goods in return. Overall trade grew compared to last year, with exports falling slightly while imports rose. This led to a smaller trade surplus than the previous year. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan held a lengthy press conference in Yerevan today, addressing key issues, including peace talks with Azerbaijan, Armenia's foreign alliances, and its aspirations towards European Union membership.
At a press conference in Armenia's capital, Yerevan, Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan confirmed that the draft peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan has been finalized, with negotiations on the text now complete. Consultations are ongoing to determine the next steps and to outline a clear roadmap. Pashinyan said a preliminary signing of the agreement remains a possibility, but only if Armenia's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and state interests are fully respected. The Prime Minister also addressed plans to open transport and trade routes linking Armenia and Azerbaijan, including transit through each other's territories and international communications.
Our position in general is that Armenia is interested in and supports the opening of transport communications in the region, including from Armenia to Armenia through the territory of Azerbaijan, from Azerbaijan to Azerbaijan through the territory of Armenia, as well as bilateral trade turnover and international communication from Armenia through Azerbaijan to third countries, and vice versa.
On the security front, Pashinyan stated that Armenia is more likely to withdraw from the Collective Security Treaty Organization than to resume its membership. Turning to Armenia's European Union ambitions, the Prime Minister reiterated the country's goal to join the European Union. He acknowledged the process is complex and requires unanimous approval from all EU member states. Armenia is actively pursuing reforms to meet EU criteria, and its parliament has passed legislation to begin the membership process. However, Pashinyan noted that Armenia will eventually face a choice between membership in the Eurasian Economic Union and the European Union, a decision that will be made in the future.
And now we're joined live by AnewZ, President of Dragoman Strategies from Istanbul, Turkey. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, Prime Minister Pashinyan, in his statement to the media, talked about the existence of certain forces inside Russia willing to force Yerevan into action against its own free will. He also emphasized his relations with the Russian leaders. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, it's no surprise that Russia, since the breakup of the USSR, is still trying to be very powerful and very, determining in the former Soviet Union republics. However, there are some that actually do go along with decisions of Moscow, and there are those that are enjoying their sovereignty and their freedom. So it wouldn't be a surprise for Russia to try to intervene in the policies and the policy making of the former Soviet Union member states. But as we see, that some of them, although are going by Moscow policies, most of them are not. So it wouldn't be a surprise to me if they are indeed trying to do so, the same thing in Armenia.
Now, it appears that Pashinyan has indicated his readiness to allow a third party to oversee the movement of people and cargo through the Zangezur Passage, contradicting the position previously articulated by his foreign ministry. Are you surprised about this?
Well, you must realize, I think anybody that is thinking about the good for the future of Armenia must realize that they need to resolve this very long-standing matter. And of course, it's not an easy thing for a politician to solve a very problematic issue, but still try to keep the support domestically and politically. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are some other moves, from President Pashinyan that we would never think about before in order to resolve this, because I think anybody in their right mind knows that this is certainly one of the biggest issues that Armenia needs to resolve if they want to pursue for the good of their own people.
Now, finally, also perhaps more importantly, he expressed regret over the belated recognition by Armenia of Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, including Karabakh. Could this somehow change the approach maintained by Baku regarding the peace process?
Well, I mean, there are certain things that no country, including Azerbaijan, would accept, no matter what the consequences are. So if President Pashinyan and the rest of the Armenian government tries to do something that crosses the red line for Azerbaijan, again, the problems will continue and they will harden. As you know, Turkey, as a government, especially President Erdogan, has had always the same, stand towards this problem. That no matter what the price is, we will stand by our, brothers in Azerbaijan, as both countries consider the two countries as, as two countries but one state, one nation and two states. So the bottom line is, whether they have a change in their policies or not, if they want to resolve their long-standing issues and problems, they must make sure that they are actually abiding by the international law and the respect to their neighbors' territorial integrity.
Thank you very much for your time and insight.
Thank you.
In our recent episode of Inside Politics, Anastasia Lavrini discussed the latest statement by Nikol Pashinyan about the Zangezur corridor with Matthew Breiser, former U.S. diplomat.
I think our Azerbaijani viewers should realize that Pashinyan wants peace. There's a senior Armenian diplomat I was talking to, let's just say last week. And he said, I have been working on the Karabakh question for the past 25 years. And we, Armenia, have never been this serious about finalizing a peace agreement. And he highlighted, again, as I said before, Prime Minister Pashinyan for years has proposed the corridors of peace. That includes the Zangezur corridor. So if you listen to what Pashinyan has been saying, this is no surprise at all. He wants peace. He's happy for the Zangezur corridor to happen, but he also wants other corridors as well. And that message is often attacked in Armenia and ignored elsewhere, but it's time to pay attention to it. He wants peace, finally, after losing that war, and of course, President Aliyev wants peace. Prime Minister Pashinyan has been saying for a long time we recognize that Karabakh is part of Azerbaijan. First, he did it implicitly, then he's done it explicitly, and he's now consistently saying, yes, we have to have peace with our neighbors. His messaging is to the people of Armenia, right? That's his audience. His audience is those Armenians who are not part of the so-called Karabakh clan, who are not absolutely categorically opposed to any compromise with Azerbaijan, but those whom he needs to win over to basically secure a referendum that changes Armenia's constitution so that the constitution makes it absolutely clear that Karabakh is nothing but part of Azerbaijan. Now, how they got to that point, of course it was after they lost the Second Karabakh War. It was Pashinyan himself who said back in 2019 in August that the old policy of the Minsk Group of land for peace is no longer, and now Armenia will pursue new wars for new territories. He had been manipulated by the Armenian National Committee of America and the Dashnak Syutun, the extreme revanchist nationalists in Armenia, and they lost. And Pashinyan, I think, realizes he was manipulated, and he's furious, and he is making clear that the old false myths that drove the Armenian extreme nationalists, that God wants there to be a greater Armenia carved out of the territory of Turkey and Azerbaijan, and that Azerbaijan, that their soldiers can't fight ever as well as Armenian ones, was completely false. And so now Pashinyan he has been for over a year making the sort of statements like you just said. And now, though, he's telling his people, we are going to reach peace now. So, Anastasia, I think the fact that he repeated these statements today, in the context of the Armenian diplomat telling me last week we've never been this serious, are powerful signs that we are on the verge of a peace treaty.
The European Commission has formally warned Georgia that its visa-free regime with the EU could be suspended unless key reforms are made by the end of August. In a letter to the Foreign Minister, Maka Bochorishvili, Brussels urged the Georgian Dream government to repeal laws targeting civil society, strengthen anti-corruption efforts, and align with EU visa policy. The warning follows a July 15 meeting of EU foreign ministers in Brussels. The Commission says Georgia's 2017 visa-free status is now under review due to serious breaches of fundamental rights, and failure to act could trigger Article 8 of the EU visa regulation, that is, suspending visa-free travel for Georgian citizens. A forest fire that started in western Turkey has spread to neighboring Çanakkale. The blaze began around noon in a non-forest area and later spread towards the town of Kavakoy in Çanakkale. The cause is still unknown as firefighting teams continue their efforts to bring the situation under control. The National Bank of Kazakhstan is preparing to launch a state crypto reserve. The country's authorities are considering investing part of their gold and foreign currency reserves, along with assets from the National Fund, into the crypto industry. Faliza Karimozina has more details in a report from Almaty.
Kazakhstan is moving forward with plans to establish a state crypto reserve. The National Bank is exploring the possibility of investing a portion of the country's gold and foreign currency reserves, as well as assets from the National Fund into cryptocurrencies. This was confirmed by the regulator's head, Timur Süleymanov. He explained that some assets are already managed with bolder strategies aiming for higher returns. As a reference, the National Bank studied the practices of major funds in the US, Norway, and Middle Eastern countries, where cryptocurrencies are often part of investment portfolios, either directly or through funds, stocks, or ETFs. Kazakhstan doesn't rule out doing the same in the future. However, as Süleymanov emphasized, crypto assets remain high risk and require a cautious approach. One of the new initiatives is the creation of a crypto reserve where digital assets seized during criminal and administrative cases will be deposited. A dedicated infrastructure will be developed to store and manage these assets. Another idea under discussion is transferring some of the cryptocurrency mined by state-owned companies to the fund, potentially as a tax or required payment. Launching the crypto reserve fully will require changes to the law. The National Bank is ready to engage with lawmakers to define the fund's legal status, funding sources, and rules for using the assets. At the same time, Kazakhstan is drafting a law on artificial intelligence, which will introduce administrative and criminal penalties for illegal crypto operations. Currently, digital asset trading in Kazakhstan is allowed only through licensed platforms at the Astana International Financial Center. And according to the regulator, more than 15,000 grey-marked transactions valued at around $3.7 million were blocked in the first quarter of 2025 alone. Fariza Kalimurzana, AnewZ, in Almaty, Kazakhstan.
Well, that's all we have for now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to AnewZ.